Welcome back. 2 weeks in a row will be a record for me for making video content, so hope you enjoy this upload. Today you're going to see a walkthrough with the builder during the construction process of how the house was framed, how the air barrier was set up, all of those details. Alright, let's jump into Brian from Beeline's construction video walking you through how we're going to frame it and how we're going to wrap the air barrier around the home.
Hey folks, Brian Williams here at Beeline Construction. So we're here to talk about the air barrier assembly as it pertains to passive house and as it pertains to the foundation. So we wanted to take a couple minutes and go through some details of that. So first off, I think the discussion should be around the air barrier is an integral part of the passive house. And the reason that is the combination of the air barrier and the insulation value controls how air gets in and out of this structure. And by controlling how the air gets in and out of the structure is how we're able to achieve the high efficiency assemblies that we're building. So pertaining to this foundation, there's two areas where our air barrier interfaces the foundation. So our first one is down here at the foundation height. So as you can see, we built our wall with our foam board box blocks here to give us our R value. But after we built it, we had to access back here to the concrete wall of the foundation, because this concrete wall of the foundation is considered to be the air barrier. And a lot of you guys might think, hey, we're down in the hole here, 9 feet below grade. Can air really get in and out of there? And the answer is yes, it can. So with the way that we're building our slab, we're addressing our insulation value and our air barrier here as well. So the easiest way to talk about this is to go from the top down. So you can see our red line here that we have chalked around is going to be our finished floor height for our poured concrete floor in the house. So we'll have 4 inches of poured concrete. Underneath that 4 inches of poured concrete will be our 20 mil plastic that acts as our air barrier for our floor. So our floor air barrier keeps any air from coming up through the ground or through this cold joint here between the foundation and the footer, so that you don't get any air infiltration from the bottom up. So what we're going to do is we're going to tape our plastic sheeting to the foundation here. Now underneath that plastic sheeting, we're going to have 8 inches of foam board. So that's going to be 4 layers of 2-inch foam insulation. And that's what's going to give us our insulation value below the subfloor. Like I said earlier, the two main facets of passive house is the air barrier and the R value. So we're getting both our air barrier here by sealing our 20 mil plastic to the foundation, and we're also getting our R value here by having our 8 inches of foam board underneath the concrete. Underneath that foam board will be a layer of gravel here just to prep and level out the rough grade of the undisturbed soil here, but that should make our floor assembly. And so by doing the floor assembly that way, our continuous air barrier that goes throughout the upper parts of the house that we'll be looking at later is also maintained throughout both the foundation and also the floor of the basement slab. So now we're up on top of the structure, and we'll talk a little bit about how we continue that continuous air barrier and R value assembly into the house, into our frame structure. So as you can see, we're at the top of the foundation wall. Similar to like we had to do down below, we had to remove some of the foam form foundation to expose the concrete, because again, just like downstairs, the concrete of the foundation wall is our air barrier for the foundation. So we removed some of our concrete, we cleaned up any of the slag on here, so we've got a good taping area to tape here. Now on top of the foundation wall, we'll have our pressure treated plates, 2x6 plate, and then on top of that we'll have our 3/4 inch subfloor. So our next layer of air barrier tape will connect to the foundation here, continue up over the 1.5 inch plate and 3/4 inch subfloor, and then fold over that subfloor. So on the subfloor, that air barrier will be continuous at all of the seams of the subfloor for 12 inches inside the house. And the reason that is because this house is a triple wall construction house to be passive. So we've got our exterior 2x4 structural wall. So this wall is virtually identical to any wall that any house is built out of. Now, inside of that, we've got a 3-inch air gap space. That's going to be completely filled with insulation, final product. And then we have an interior 2x4 wall. The interior 2x4 wall is not structural, but it is the wall that the interior part of the air envelope attaches to. So the final product will have that air assembly coming from the foundation underneath the first 2x4 wall, underneath the 3-inch air barrier, and then wrapping up the inside of that 2x4 wall. Now, after we get that air barrier in place, then we come back one more time and we build an additional 2x3 interior service cavity wall. And that interior service cavity wall is where all of your MEPs run. So that's where your electrical and your plumbing and all of your mechanicals for the house run inside that interior 2x3 wall. And the idea behind that is all of this wiring and ductwork and piping and things like that is not in your air barrier space, and it is not in your insulation space. So we're minimizing the penetrations to the exterior, so we're minimizing the penetrations through the air barrier of the passive house.
Thanks, Brian, for that helpful walkthrough. Here we're going to jump again, like I said, to a bit later in the construction process where I'll show you how the walls were actually framed. And then as you can see in the walls, we have a 2x4 here. We have a cavity in the middle going down. We have another 2x4 here. And when they, well, let me show you on this side actually. So they'll also have, then we're going to have an air barrier here. And then, outside of the air barrier, then we'll have the interior wall. So we're going to have a 2x4, some area that they'll blow in with insulation so that the cold temperature or the hot temperature doesn't travel through the wood. It's called thermal bridging, so it doesn't travel through the wood. And you can watch my video on the 5 elements of a passive house and what is a passive house to understand a bit more about that. So we're going to make it so the temperature can't travel through with insulation blown throughout. And then we'll have the air barrier to make it so no air comes in, or so that we're in a very controlled way exchanging air throughout the house. And then a 2x3 wall on the interior. I wanted to show downstairs in the basement as well, where because we didn't want thermal bridging, we ended up having these steel beams come up and support the metal beam and then hanged the joists off of that beam. You can see it's really well insulated, and we have that major beam going through the whole basement, and then we have those 3 support beams going across, which provide a lot of stability for the big metal beam going in the middle, with then insulation and framing around the inside of that. If you check out Matt Riesinger's channel, The Build Show, he shows, especially for his own house, different ways of putting insulation, like putting insulation primarily on the outside of the home, kind of like a jacket is how he describes it, instead of putting it on the inside of the home. So there's a lot of different approaches, and ours was just one of them, but our house is really well insulated. I think from that perspective, it's doing really well. And with the overhangs and everything of the home, it's a really great setup for our house. So hopefully that helps show you a bit about how they did the air barrier and the framing for our house. I know our energy consultant and our architect are working on other passive buildings right now at this point, and they're trying a variety of different approaches. Ours is just one of many, and some approaches can be better for different environments or for different needs. Well, thanks for watching another video. I believe the next video I'm going to do is on Alpine windows and doors, and show some of the issues that we had with that and some of the advantages as well. So please follow along.